In one specific way, can Nebraska become the next Alabama? We'll talk about it next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase.
All right, welcome in. It is Wednesday. I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer, 1620. The Zone is with me. We are continuing to talk. It's the only thing to talk about this week.
Yeah.
About Dana Holgorsen, Nebraska's new offensive coordinator. Of course, there's the backdrop of Nebraska's quarterback situation. No information coming out of Lincoln this week about what's happening at the quarterback spot. We don't know about Dylan Raiola's progress through practice. Assume that some things have been decided as we have arrived at Wednesday with the game Saturday, Nebraska at USC at the Los Angeles Coliseum, 3 p.m. Central Time. Today, we're going to dig a little more under the radar. There are the big storylines that have been in the news all week about Dana Holgorsen. One, it's for this year, not the future. Two, they're not going to reinvent their offense here in November. No air raid coming to Nebraska. But Matt Rhule covered a lot of ground in his press conference way back on Monday. And one of the things, Connor, that he slipped in is that he has watched what Nick Saban did at Alabama. And Rhule took note of the fact that Saban helped pump life back into the careers of, well, he mentioned Lane Kiffin and Bill O'Brien. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg when you talk about the Nick Saban coaching rehabilitation program. Steve Sarkisian, the Texas coach, Mario Cristobal, the Miami coach, Butch Jones, the former Tennessee coach who now is at a group of five schools. He had Arkansas State, I think that might
right.
be.
Yeah.
He has gone through the Saban School of Coaching Rehabilitation. So Rhule, can he be the next Nick Saban? Can Dana Holgorsen be his first case of helping a coach get back on his feet, a head coach get back on his feet?
Well, I think at first he was trying to be a Nick Saban in that way, but just in a slightly different way, where this could be like a jumping off point for coaches, and Saban has some examples of that in his resume as well.
Kurt Cignetti.
Most notably this year, Kurt Cignetti, of course, who was with.
There are many others. Kirby Smart. Yeah.
I guess not most notably, but most topically, Kurt Cignetti this year for what he's doing at Indiana. He was with Saban from right. I think he was on Saban's
Very
first
beginning.
half. From 07 to 10. So
it was an indirect route to the top for Cignetti.
Yeah. He bet on himself a little bit, but he was at Alabama for a period of time and sort of saw how that thing worked. It would be, let's just say this. If Nebraska is going to be a spot for rehabilitation, is always the way I always talk about it in the sense of it's the Nick Saban School of Rehabilitation, like you just laid out. If Nebraska is going to be that or a version of that, it's very different from what it's trying to do right now, right? So
you have to be very good. You have to be winning national championships in order to bring coaches in, elevate them in from analysts to coordinator spots, and then get them back into the head coaching realm. Like, you have to be making the college football playoff. So Nebraska is several steps behind in this trek. But
I'll answer my own question that I asked in the cold open. My answer is no.
Okay. You're just gonna we're not gonna entertain this idea. Matt Rhule cannot. He's not gonna be able to do this.
I think that they can. I think that Dana Holgorsen can have success. And like maybe they have a good year the rest of the year and next year, and then he gets another head coach shot again, because it seems like that's kind of what he wants. Like, but as far as this being a trend, I still think Matt Rhule appreciates, developing young coaches and then having them sort of, fly out of the nests and go spread their wings at other places.
Well, I mean, hey, that opens the door to probably a more pertinent conversation here than whether Matt Rhule can be the next Nick Saban in rebranding coaches. Does this signal a change in the future in the way that Matt Rhule will look at assistant coaches? Might we see him be more open to working alongside veteran coaches who don't necessarily have the same, look, you hire Garrett McGuire, you bring in Terrence Knighton, Evan Cooper from the beginning of this thing, Rob Dvorak. These are guys who are full of energy, full of life, wanting to do everything for the first time, second time as coaches at this level. And that benefits you in certain ways. But with the way the coaching world is changing in college football, we talk about this seemingly every episode for a different reason, and how you can have 20 coaches on your staff, is there room for Matt Rhule to also foster relationships with more veteran coaches that aren't expected to do all of the same things that coaches in their 20s and 30s have to do? I don't expect that Dana Holgorsen, in his time at Nebraska, however long or short that is going to be pounding the pavement in recruiting. And he doesn't need to be. Maybe he'll go see a quarterback at some point. He doesn't need to be, because Nebraska can send Jamar Mosey or Keith Williams out on the road and do that work for him. It has totally changed the game, and it might also change the way that Matt Rhule approaches hiring assistant coaches and coordinators.
You can absolutely have a great mix of both. And I do think, like, I don't know about you, Mitch, but I've thought about this a little bit this week too. I sort of like the setup of having all of these, the younger coaches that you just mentioned. I mean, let's specifically look at the offense with Dana Holgorsen running it now. Garrett McGuire and EJ Barthel and Donovan Raiola, those guys who young, hungry, I guess, obviously Garrett to a different extent than those other two, but come from the Rhule sort of tree. But now they're under the Holgorsen, like Holgorsen is basically the head coach of the offense. So maybe it's a different thing where we're talking about assistant coaches and coordinators. Nebraska fans have always wanted Nebraska to hire experienced and decorated coordinators. And I think they sort of struggled with the idea that Nebraska would have these guys and then they would promote them, and then they would have really young defensive and offensive coordinators. Well, maybe this is a change, or maybe this is just a short-term stopgap. And they need to get this offense off the ground before they do anything else.
Maybe this is the change in philosophy that would allow Phil Snow, nearly 70 years old, to be a defensive coordinator again in college football. When he retired or stepped down from full-time coaching after the run in Carolina didn't work, there was not an option to be a defensive coordinator or a college football assistant and never recruit and just stay in the office and work on defense and work on scheme all the time. But if Tony White goes and gets a head coaching job after this season, Phil Snow's going to be sitting there, and he's the consultant for Nebraska. He knows the players. He knows the system. Do you just make him your defensive coordinator and say, hey, this is not a defensive coordinator a la 2016, like 2025 is a little bit different. Maybe he would entertain that possibility. It opens up all kinds of different scenarios for Matt Rhule and people like him.
Experience doesn't make it. Let's just say this: like, experience doesn't make it inherently better or more obvious that they're going to have better results on the offense or defensive side of the ball. Like, you could have a young wonderkind offensive coordinator and he comes in and lights the world on fire, and then he's gone. But generally, for the position that Nebraska's in right now, especially, I do think it would be nice to have some experience of, having a system and having a scheme and having an identity and just starting at some real base points, because it feels like Nebraska's had a lot thrown at them on offense this year, and just starting from a point of simplicity is a really good idea, regardless of what scheme you're running. People have complained about the scheme this week and air raid and this and that, but like, I think you look at this through the prism of simplicity and laying down a base for whatever comes next.
Yeah, we're going to get into who Matt Rhule hires, the type of coaches that he hires, how important it is for them to have history with him in the next segment. One thing I want to finish this one with. This was way under the radar on what Rhule had to say on Monday. We talked about Garrett McGuire in this segment. He mentioned that McGuire, in assisting Holgorsen as Holgorsen attempts to get up to speed with Nebraska this week and last week, that Garrett can essentially translate the language, like whatever it is, whatever offensive football language that Dana Holgorsen speaks in his air raid, spread it out, Texas world. Yep. Garrett knows that. I like the idea of Garrett being like bilingual and trilingual, and he's in football languages. He's like, wait, what language does this coach speak? Okay, yeah, I know that. I know that language. Let me be the translator. So maybe he's on the headset and Dana's going to call the plays, and then Garrett's going to go, okay, in our language, that means trips that, whatever. But, he's the 25-year-old kid who knows every language of football. I guess he speaks Texan really well, which is perhaps what Dana operates in after his time. He's not a native Texan. He's a native Iowan, by the way.
Yeah.
But he speaks Texan when it comes to football because of his time at Texas Tech in Houston.
I'm thinking of Shohei Ohtani and Ipe, Well, yeah. I can see as a new translator now, but, they're just walking around together trying to, and Ohtani's the busy one. And mm-hmm. He's asking him like, hey, what's going on here? And then Garrett's like, all right, here's what we got. Yeah.
Right, like Matt Rhule comes up to Holgorsen one day in the office and starts talking to him, and Holgorsen just looks at Garrett like, "What's he talking about?" And then Garrett explains, "Well, what he's saying, Coach, is this and this and this."
So, everything is exactly the same except for it has a little Texas twang to it.
There you go. At least it's not that hard. The stuff that they have to do in Major League Baseball and the NBA with all the languages that need to be translated, if they can do it, then Matt Rhule and Dana Holgorsen can communicate because they have Garrett McGuire and. It is actually the same language. All right. That was a tangent we didn't need to go down. But when we come back, Dana Holgorsen was not hired because he's Matt Rhule's friend. That's after the break. All right, Mitch Sherman here to tell you about Game Time because basketball season is here and Game Time makes getting tickets to basketball games so much easier. You want to see a buzzer beater or a great overtime game? Maybe you want to get downtown in Lincoln or Omaha this November, December, see a game at the Pinnacle Bank Arena or the CHI Health Center. You can't do it if you don't have tickets. And Game Time offers you the best way to get tickets for basketball, concerts, shows. It's not just sports. Check out the feature of the Game Time app that they call Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluffy stuff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, which is what you want. So you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of options. Game Time allows you to customize your spot in the basketball arena. I love that you can get curated deals that make it easier to find the best price on great seats. Game Time provides seat views before you buy. It's got the super deal, which is a unique feature that you need to examine, event cancellation protection, and always the lowest price guarantee. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app today. What time is it? It's game time.
All right, welcome back on a Wednesday. Connor Happer here from 1620 The Zone and Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Don't forget to get your questions in, comments for the mailbag show, which we will have tomorrow here on this feed for you. Appreciate you guys participating in that all year. You can email us lockedonneb@gmail.com, tweet, leave a comment. I think that's basically it, right?
Yeah, leave a comment on YouTube. You can call us if you know our phone numbers, text, whatever.
Yeah,
but
sure, go ahead.
See me at the grocery store, have a question, we'll put it into the mailbag.
That has happened. You never know who you might see at the grocery store. So you touched on it a little bit before the break. In the idea that, quote from Rhule on Monday, it's not a friend thing. So Rhule and Holgorsen have a relationship. They have been around each other. There clearly is some respect there. They coached against each other, and Rhule spoke very highly of him on Monday. But there has been this growing sense around here that Rhule brought all of his friends and to coach with them at Nebraska, and that was, I think, a big complaint at least, I host a sports talk radio show, so I hear stuff like this all the time. People call him the show and they say, well, he won't fire Satterfield because he's his friend. And well, he there was some dispelling of that notion, I suppose, this week. But another person close to the Rhule camp is now another two people close to the Rhule camp club coming in. But these couple with fresh eyes. Rhule, once again, another example of him being pretty acutely aware of the narratives that are going on about him in the space of Nebraska football fandom, which I find pretty interesting.
So a little something to mention on this. Let's look at Nebraska coaches over the last 25 years. Frank Solich hired some of his friends like Barney Cotton, Dave Gillespie, Turner Gill, and
football
others.
Coaches everywhere, every day hire their friends. That's
kind of what I was going to say. This is like Kevin Cosgrovitis. Nebraska fans still have PTSD from Kevin Cosgrove being the defensive coordinator for Nebraska over 4 seasons. He was Bill Callahan's friends. Bo Pelini hired some of his friends. Absolutely. Marvin Sanders was his friend. I think that Carl Pelini was his friend, although that could be further examined. Mike Riley, he hired some of his friends. Maybe not as much as others, but Mark Banker was certainly Mike Riley's friend.
Right hand,
and
sure.
He got blown out of town after two seasons. Scott Frost undoubtedly hired his friends to coach with him. So this happens with head coaches. And, Matt Rhule did it with Satterfield. Absolutely. Friend, coworker, colleague, longtime sidekick. Evan Cooper was a friend. Others who played for Rhule, coached under Rhule. He also hired Tony White. Ed Foley was that's the one that probably gets mentioned most now that Satterfield is outside of the coordinator realm. Tony White, that was a well-researched non-friend hire for Matt Rhule. So this one, you could say that Matt and Dana are friendly and have a relationship, but Rhule made it a point to say while he was speaking on Monday, quote, "It's not a friend thing."
This may be as close to a, because we hear this stuff all the time, and it's like, well, they hire their friends, and Nebraska kind of goes outside of its circle here, and I think this is maybe as close to, and we're just talking about the coordinator spots, I guess. This is maybe as close to a, I always call it a fantasy football staff hiring, people do this every offseason. They're like, let's fire the coordinators and let's go get the best defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator in the country, or some guy who has been a head coach and maybe he'll take a step down to be the coordinator at Nebraska. Like we do that, fans around here do that every offseason. And I call it fantasy football coach hiring. This is as close to that as I have ever seen at Nebraska. Yeah. So you kind of got what you want here, if that's what your complaint was going back.
Yeah. Sadly, the other prominent example of that in recent Nebraska history would probably be Bob Diaco. Had been a head coach, had been a successful defensive coordinator, and that's who Mike Riley went to go get. And it wasn't a fit. Anyway, I've talked about that previously this week. We're not going to belabor that point about Bob Diaco because people don't want to hear that Dana Holgorsen could end up being the next Bob Diaco at Nebraska. Like let's allow him to have some success in Lincoln, like in 2024 and even into 2025, before we even consider tagging him with that label. You know who would hire fantasy staffs basically on a yearly basis and had no intention at all of ever hiring his friends is Nick Saban, to bring it back to the beginning of this conversation. One thing that Rhule said in talking about this subject and the subject that we discussed at the beginning of the show, he said in working with someone who's been a head coach before they arrive here, so in hiring Dana Holgorsen, he said, this is a lonely job sometimes, and to have someone in the building who has coached at the same level, you have to have someone to bounce ideas off. So Rhule is suggesting that sometimes as the head guy, people don't want to come to him and relate to him with the things that they're struggling with, because as the guy who's up at the top of the food chain, making $6, $7, $8 million a year, he's somewhat removed from the problems that they might have, even if it's a game planning problem or a problem they have with an individual player. Rhule has high expectations for these coaches, so sometimes they feel that they can't come to him. At least that's the way Rhule views it. Well, Holgorsen is going to have, and he's going to understand Rhule's perspective. So in a way, I think Matt is hoping that Dana can provide him some company at the top of the Nebraska football pecking order, because he has been through many of these things that Matt Rhule's going through as a head coach.
That's really interesting. And it does go along with our first topic that we brought to the table, which is like, hey, this is all a bunch of young coaches who can sort of operate in the background and don't have this, they don't have to talk to the media all the time, right? Nebraska's not putting assistants out there, position coaches out there, really at all during this season, with the exception of going on the radio network a couple times. So like, there's not a whole lot to sort of answer for. They could just kind of do their jobs, and then it all kind of comes on the head coach at the end of the day. And the head coach says, yeah, that's difficult. And I do think, for people who haven't been there before, it's hard to sort of see it in the head coach's, through his eyes sometimes. So,
undoubtedly.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty interesting and definitely a part of what's happening here.
Yeah. All right, let's come back after the break and talk about how Dylan Raiola fits into all of this with Dana Holgorsen, another topic that has been covered, but somewhat under the radar this week.
All right, it's happening for the FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle all the NFL action this weekend with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get that hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats view, live play-by-play, and so much more right on that same page where you place your bets. Commanders and Eagles tomorrow on Thursday Night Football is a really good slate of the NFL this weekend. So now is the time. It's time to jump in. And once again, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That is at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Head to FanDuel.com today to get started.
All right, back here on this Wednesday in November, I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer, 1620 The Zone, is with me. Hey, really quick news on Tuesday out of USC. The NCAA fined the Trojans $50,000 and put USC, Nebraska's opponent this week, on 1 year of probation because it found that in 2022 and 2023, USC had 8 analysts who were working in on-field coaching roles.
Incredible. The like how the NCAA doesn't see the irony in what they're doing sometimes is amazing to me. It's incredible. Like, imagine I'd be freaking out right now if I was a USC fan. I'd be like, what the hell? This isn't even a rule. Now you're going back and retroactively putting me on probation, even though it means nothing. It's just like a fine and, whatever. It doesn't actually mean anything, but like, what the hell? This is garbage. This is a fake rule. It's not even a rule anymore.
You might also be freaking out because they had 8 extra coaches and didn't win the national championship.
Too many cooks, Mitch. Too many cooks.
Yeah. No word on whether USC is planning to hold a press conference where the athletic director will admonish the head coach and give him disapproving looks.
They should, though, just for the bit. That'd be fun.
Yeah. All right. So again, on the Thursday show, we're going to do a mailbag. You want to ask us about that? You want to ask us about anything that's on your mind? This is the time to do it. Send in your questions to us on email, lockedonneb@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter. You know where that is. Also, you can leave a question in the comment section on YouTube. That will work. We'll get to it all, have a show out on Thursday morning featuring your questions. And then, of course, our picks for this upcoming weekend in college football, including that big Nebraska USC game, will be featured on our Friday show. All right, back to the conversation about storylines that may have been overlooked somewhat this week as Nebraska makes the move to Dana Holgorsen as its full-time offensive coordinator. So Rhule was asked if Dylan Raiola factored into this and in what way Dylan trusts Matt Rhule to make this decision work for the freshman quarterback. And Rhule quickly said that Dylan trusts me and he trusts this program. And then he went on to a different topic of conversation as he answered that question. And to that, I would say, if there are some who are bristling at the fact that this is even coming up, Matt Rhule didn't bristle at that, but he dispensed of it quickly. Don't blame us. Don't blame the media. Don't blame the fans who are at various levels of freak out mode that Nebraska has to cater to its freshman quarterback. Blame the system that has led, 75% of 4- and 5-star quarterbacks to enter the portal at some point in their careers. That was the number that Max Olson of ESPN, formerly of The Athletic, in his time at The Athletic, came up with when he assessed the recruiting classes from 2017 to 2020. 4- and 5-star quarterbacks. You take out the players who were injured. You take out the players who switched positions when they got to college. And the rest of them who were just regular quarterbacks who were playing football, 75% in those 4 classes hit the portal at some point in their careers. So it's just something that's always there. Whether you're having a good season, a bad season, whether your offensive coordinator is doing great and is up for a job at another school, or you have to make a change 9 games into the season, it's always out there. It's always a conversation topic. Matt Rhule wants to reassure you that Dylan trusts him and that he trusts what Nebraska's doing.
I'll say that is always a position, even before the easier ability to transfer. You don't have to sit out a year. That has always been a position, the quarterback position, that has had more movement than any other position. And now that you've taken the guardrails off, it's just a free for all because there's only so many spots. Nebraska, before they got Dylan Raiola last year, was looking in the portal for a guy who had started game. They were looking at a guy who started games at Ohio State, Michigan State. I can't remember who else there was a flirtation with, but
the guy who's starting for USC this week, Jaden Mayava from UNLV, he was a name that came up. Yeah,
freshman of the year at UNLV last year.
Will Howard, the starting quarterback now at Ohio State, was someone who was on Nebraska's radar. Obviously, Nebraska flirted most with Kyle McCord, who's now the starter at Syracuse. Ohio State's former. Did you hear that Syracuse coach Fran Brown refuses to shower after losses
because he is not? He deemed himself not deserving of the soap. That's what he said.
This is a Matt Rhule guy.
That's what I'm saying. It's a Matt Rhule guy. It's a football guy. I like that. You seem a little skeptical.
Yeah, I don't like it. Does it just mean that he doesn't shower on Saturday night and then like Sunday he's good to go?
Yeah, I don't think he I don't think he not showers all week because that would be a long week.
Okay,
but
good.
Good. Anyway, yeah. Right. Quarterbacks. I understand everybody looking at this and saying, "Hey, we got to make Dylan Raiola happy." But I think Rhule would tell you, "All right, yeah, of course we have to make Dylan Raiola happy. We have to get him feeling good about himself." But the way we do that is a more overarching thing. We just have to get good. That's what he's like. I'm going to take Rhule at face value when he says we just have to, we have to get good. And all these other things will fall into place. Obviously there are parts of that touch every part of the program. And so people always wonder about motivations and the powers, but I could pretty confidently say that Matt Rhule is the sole person in charge of Nebraska's football program and the decision making inside of it. I've never felt that confident about any other coach in saying that. There's always been other powers at work at Nebraska, always. But with this one, I just think there's a lot less, if any.
It is an interesting thought, to expand it out from Dylan Raiola, because there are other players on this team and how they've handled it. And Rhule said that he's not heard anything from a player that the decision to change offensive coordinators in November was a good move or a bad move. He said the players have just wanted to know, hey, what can I do? What do we need to do next? Where do we go? And then Rhule in I think a moment of self-awareness and that conversation that he had, or that topic that he broached about having assistant coaches on staff who can finally understand what he's going through as a head coach is another moment of self-awareness. A lot of introspection and self-awareness from Rhule. It's self-awareness in him acknowledging publicly that, hey, maybe I'm not best at being aggressive as an offensive coach, and I need to bring somebody in to balance me out, because my tendency is to coach from a defensive standpoint and be conservative when it comes to offensive things. So does it work? Will it work to be aggressive offensively and mix that with what Rhule wants to do? But he said of the players that he believes there are, quote, seismic conversations that are happening inside the locker room about this offensive coordinator situation. So you have to wonder what those, he's probably right. I'm sure he's right. You have to wonder what those conversations must be like inside the locker room, and just how it's going to impact Nebraska when it goes out on the field Saturday.
It's tough to get everybody like all the time on the same page, especially when you're kind of floundering out there right now. So we'll see how they're able to bring them together. Success helps. Winning a football game helps. Going on the road and winning a football game helps. And Nebraska has a chance to do that on Saturday. Plenty more of that chatter in the next two shows. Once again, get those questions in for the mailbag. Mitch will be on location in not a sunny place, but a dark.
I'm hoping it's sunny. Place. Oh, on Friday morning. Yeah, Friday morning I could be doing a show in pitch darkness because of the time change. We'll see. We'll figure that out. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the journey out to the West Coast and all that entails. That'll be Thursday is a travel day for me. That's tomorrow. So be sure to get those mailbag questions in so we can answer those early and get that show posted early in the morning on Thursday.
All right. Appreciate y'all listening today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On College Football Podcast. You can check out everything you need, and check out the Locked On Big Ten Podcast, where Craig's got you covered over there. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.